Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Wrestling Guy Store. Let's give it up for Vince Russo.
What's going on, fellas?
That's cool. You just blessed us right now.
There you go, man. See
I
that?
forgot I had the black bat back there.
There you go.
All right, so the Q&A is very simple. We'll raise your hand. We'll have you guys ask questions. Any question you want. Be professional, of course. So, who wants to go first?
Do you think China belongs in the Hall of Fame?
I think I've said this a lot, man. When you're a part of the wrestling business, you know, as I was, and you see what these guys go through, you know, the guys and the gals. I mean, you know, the sacrifices they make, what they put their bodies through, being away from their families, life on the road. Being a wrestler is a very, very, very hard job. So if I were running the Hall of Fame, if it were me, anybody that ever set foot in a ring in the WWE would be in the Hall of Fame. So like China, definitely. But there's so many people, in my opinion, that deserve to be there. And I mean, and if it were me, you know, like I said, just knowing what these people go through, to give them that last shining moment, you know, that would mean the world to them. I would put everybody in the Hall of Fame if it were up to me. But China, definitely, yes.
What do you think of the Montreal Screwjob, Brett?
As far as what? Like,
The whole thing?
well, you know, again, I was very close to that situation, and I mean, there's a lot of things like that people, you know, on the outside don't really know unless you were there and you were a part of it. And I mean, at the end of the day, Vince McMahon didn't trust Eric Bischoff. You know, it had nothing to do with him not trusting Brett at all. He didn't trust Eric, and Vince was afraid, you know, that Brett was going to go to WCW with his belt, and Eric Bischoff was going to do something stupid. So that's why Vince had to make sure he got the belt off of Brett. I was also there, and let me make this perfectly clear. I'm a huge Bret Hart fan, but I was there when Vince, you know, was suggesting every single finish you can imagine to Brett. I mean, everything. We came up with so many options, and you know, it was just no. So at the end of the day, I hate that the situation happened. I mean, I wish it never happened. You know, I mean, it was just a bad situation. But I also know that Vince made that decision to protect his company and protect everybody that was working in his company. And that's why he did it. It was never, ever personal with Brett. It was Vince protecting, you know, the WWE. So as much as I hate the incident, I hate that it happened. It was unfortunate. If I were in Vince's shoes, I would have probably done the same thing.
Yeah, I want to go back to that. Why do you think he didn't want to drop the title that way? Is it because of Shawn Michaels? Because due to her past, they didn't really get along? Or is there another way you could prevent that, like choose another opponent back then?
Shawn and Brett, I mean, really, really hated each other. I mean, they probably, you know, I worked with a lot of guys and in 3 different companies and stuff. They hated each other more than any 2 guys I've ever seen in the business hate each other. And I mean, you know, Brett just had such a hatred for Shawn that, you know, like losing the belt to Shawn in his home country was an insult. So immediately, like you said, you know, there were other ways to do it, and we even suggested that Brett lose the belt before, you know, we got to the event in the United States. And, you know, Brett turned that down. You know, it got to the point that, you know, Brett just did not want to, you know, do the job for Shawn. And, you know, when it got to that point, it was almost a situation where Vince just had no other choice.
All right, let me ask you another question. What do you think Brett wanted to do? Do you think he wanted to bring the title to WCW, or did you really think that he wanted to give out a goodbye to the WWF fans that he's going to WCW, and he'll just work the title. What do you think?
No, there's no doubt in my mind. Like Brett didn't have any intentions like that at all. I mean, there's no doubt in my mind. He wasn't thinking about bringing the belt to the WCW and sticking it to Vince. He wasn't thinking anything like that. It was really just how much he really hated Shawn at the time. I mean, that's really what it came down to. If it were somebody else, I don't think that situation would have ever happened. But I don't think Brett ever had any intentions of doing anything damaging to the WWE at all.
After working so closely with Brett in WWE and working with Screwjob, what was it like working with him back in WCW?
Nah, bro, I'll be honest with you. Literally like a week after that incident happened, Owen called me. And he was in a really tough spot because Owen was still working for the WWE. The situation happened with Brett. Owen wasn't really involved in that. And, Owen as a professional wanted to keep working with the WWE, even though what happened to his brother, at the end of the day, business is business, and, Owen had a family to support. So Owen was having a really hard time because he wanted to continue working with the WWE, and Brett was basically telling him, if you continue to work for them, I'm disowning you as a brother. So, Owen called me about a week after, and he asked me to call Brett. And I mean, this was, a week right off of it. So, I picked up the phone and I called Brett right then, a week following. And I told him the exact same thing I told you guys. I said to him, I said, listen, Brett, I said, you will never understand this. I said, especially now. I said, but at the end of the day, in my opinion, I said, Vince was just trying to protect the company and everybody that works for the company. It had nothing to do with not trusting you. It was Eric Bischoff. And I mean, I told Brett, I said, I would have done the same exact thing. So, I mean, like a week following, I had that conversation with Brett. And then, when I went to work with him at WCW, it was a much more difficult conversation because, he had left WWE and then Owen had passed away. So now I was seeing Brett for the first time after Owen passed away. So, that was the first thing I did when I went to WCW was sit down with Brett, because if he had any questions about Owen, anything he wanted to know that night, I wanted to discuss that with him first, and anything he wanted to ask me. So that was one of the first things I did at WCW. So it wasn't difficult for me because Brett's one of those guys, man, that like I probably respected him like more than anybody else. Brett always, was the whole Canadian hero thing. And Brett believed that, and I got to be honest with you, I looked at him that way. I really, really did. He was really a stand-up guy. So, it wasn't difficult for me to talk to him after those instances because I knew, Brett would be rational enough to hear my side, I hear my opinion, and once that conversation took place, everything would be okay.
What do you think about the Sunny comments that Shawn left?
Which ones are we talking about?
I can't remember.
The Sunny Days?
Sunny Days, yeah.
Yeah, again, it was all that stuff that was stirring it up and all that stuff that was leading to Brett's hatred towards Shawn. But again, you got to understand too, like Shawn was a different guy back then. He was under the influence of a lot of pills. He wasn't thinking straight, he was slurring words. He would come to work, just dragging. He was a different guy back then. I mean, I guarantee if Shawn Michaels was sitting here right now, he would tell you that he regrets a lot of that stuff. And, the Shawn Michaels that exists today would not act like that. So, but it was just all those things that just kept feeding the fire.
Was Justin Incredible part of the clique like back in the day?
Not really.
No?
No.
I heard he was like a secret.
No, not a secret. He was associated with those guys, because they brought him in. but he was never really.
He was Aldo Montoya,
Right,
wasn't he?
right, yeah. But no, he never really hung with those guys.
I have a question. I overheard you 3 weeks ago in Piper's podcast about now that we're talking about the subject about Owen. I kind of hate the fact that you're always to blame about the whole Blue Blazer thing. And there's actual YouTube clips. If you look, put Blue Blazer, they've done that stunt before.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, I don't know how you feel as far as, because you're always being accused and you took it in stride. You were like, you respected Piper in the podcast, and how do you feel to always having to answer that question?
Here's the thing. Like, and I kind of told Roddy this off the air, because we talked a little bit before the interview. Listen, so many people, take shots at me, and I killed WCW, and I did this, and I did that, and you know what? Say whatever you want, because I'm the kind of guy that you can judge me, you can say whatever you want about me, but at the end of the day, all we really have to look at is my performance. And when I talk about my performance, I'm talking about television ratings. Nothing's come close to the Attitude Era, ever. So say whatever you want to say about me, whether you love me or whether you hate me. I look at what my accomplishments were. So that stuff doesn't bother me. But I told this to Roddy, the Owen thing is a completely different situation. And I take that very, very, very personally. And the reason why I take it personally is I loved the guy. I mean, I say this all the time, you guys, and I always say I don't pull any punches, okay? I worked with thousands and thousands of wrestlers, and this is an absolute shoot. Owen Hart is the only guy I knew that was faithful to his wife. And in the wrestling biz, I mean, that says a lot. And I respected him more than you could ever imagine. He wasn't like the other guys. He just wasn't, And so, like, I love the guy so much that when you come at me with that stuff, that to me is really crossing the line. It's very, very upsetting to me. And it's so totally unnecessary. Listen, how many people, how many guys in here, I don't know if this is the right audience, but it might be. How many guys in here are Kiss fans? Okay, if you guys, I'm a huge Kiss fan. I've been a Kiss fan my whole life, okay? Since 1975. How many years is that? 40 years now, right? My mind doesn't work.
Yeah,
If you
40.
guys know Kiss, okay, you'll know for the last 40 years, part of the show is Gene Simmons is standing on the center of the stage. He's hooked up to a harness that brings him all the way up to the top of the arena. When he gets to the top, a platform comes out. He stands on the black platform. He spits his blood, and he sings God of Thunder. That's been happening since 1975. So when you think about from 1975 to 2015, and Kiss probably tours more than any band in the world. When you think about how many times Gene Simmons has done that, you understand that the Owen accident was such a freak accident, and I mean to point the finger at like the writer of the show is just like it's such a ridiculous thing, but it does bother me. I mean, it really, really does bother me because that's very, very personal.
And nobody has really come up to defend you, and it bugs me too. Were the same people that in charge of this thing coming down in charge of the Owen thing?
Yep. And I don't know. I mean, I'll be honest with you. Like, I don't even know what came out of the lawsuit, and I don't even know the reasons. Technically why that. I don't even know any of that. But I mean, I do know when you're gonna, put that on the writer of a show. I mean, I don't know.
So do you think Sting will be in the Hall of Fame this year?
The WWE Hall of Fame
Sting?
Yeah, stay.
this year. I don't know about this year. I mean, probably not this year. I wouldn't think this year. I think they'd want him to come out and they want him to do his match and put all the focus on that match, and then probably next year would be the right time to do it.
First off, I'd like to thank you for coming here.
Oh, you're welcome.
And my question is, what concept that you came up with would you like to be remembered for? Like, out of all the ideas you've done.
You know, I just wrote this, guys. I write an article every week for WrestleZone.com, and I mean the thing I'm most proud of out of everything is is putting the belt on Booker T. And by putting the belt on Booker T, like that really doesn't mean anything. Standing up for Booker T. Because this was a guy, bro, that, you know, in WCW worked so hard, was the nicest guy on the planet, never ruffled any feathers, did whatever he was told, was such a company guy, and deserved so much more. But because he wasn't a politician, people just stepped on him and stepped over him, and he never got what he deserved. And, you know, as much as like WCW was an absolute nightmare for me, the greatest thing about it was I had the opportunity to stand up for a guy like Booker T. And at the end of the day, when he, you know, finally won the WCW world title, I mean, that really, really meant a lot to me because he deserved it so much.
Yeah, I want to go back to the question you asked you about China and the Hall of Fame. I was watching that podcast with Steve Austin and Triple H, and I kind of agree with Triple H why would not bring her in, because due to the fact that her other career might not cause her to be in the Hall of Fame. And I agree with Triple H. Now these days you have kids looking at tablets and phones, looking through the internet, like very easily, and you bring China in. Well, that 8-year-old will see not only her wrestling career, but if you scroll down to Google, you'll see the other instances. Will you still put her in, even though, you know, that other career she had, existed?
Well, you know, here's the thing. Listen, I'm friends with China, and I hate the fact that she did porn. I hate that. I hate that for her. I don't even want to think about that. Okay, but I also do know, because of the situation at WWE, you know, people got to understand. First of all, she lost her. Her and Hunter, you know, owned a house. They were talking about getting married. They were going to get married. Okay, so this girl, you know, lost her fiance and her job in the same day. Then she goes out trying to get work, right, as China. The next thing she knows, the WWE has taken her name away. So she can't use the name China. So now when she's going for, you know, movie auditions and stuff like that, not being able to portray her as China is hurting her career. So she's unable to find work. You know, she's coming off the trauma of losing a boyfriend, losing a job. She can't find work. You know, that starts leading into drinking, and that starts leading into pills. You know, all of a sudden you're rock bottom, and you need money. You need to make money, and the next thing you know, you're signing a deal with Vivid, you know, because she needed to pay the bills. I mean, that's the bottom line. But, you know, so I don't agree with any of that. I wish she would have never done that, but it is what it is. But, I mean, you know, it's like you can't have a double standard. You know, if that same 8-year-old kid Googles Hulk Hogan, we're going to see him with Bubba the Love Sponges. Why? I mean, that's what you're going to see. That's why I got so pissed off at Hunter's statement, because even if Hunter feels that way, and I can understand him feeling that way, he didn't have to say it. There was no reason for him to say it. By him saying it, all he did was take a cheap shot at her. And how can you say something like that when you know, you can Google Hulk Hogan and see the same exact thing?
Yeah, there's a little difference I see with Hogan and China. Hogan's already got in. You can Google Hogan, you see nothing but his wrestling accomplishments. That's all you see. China, you know, the porn just happened just a few years ago, and it's still
Yeah.
right there, you know.
But and like I said, I mean, I totally understand what he said and why he feels that way. That wasn't the point, but I didn't think he needed to say it. You know. I mean, so many times, you know, with the WWE, their answer is always never say never. That's always their answer.
Yeah.
That's all he had to say. When he was asked about her, all he had to say was never say never. That's it, you know. And
If I was there, I mean, if I was working in the company, if I want her in, I think the first thing I'll do is maybe have her some appearances, and then maybe she'll get a good reputation.
Yeah.
And then when I feel the time is right, then you can put her in.
Yeah.
You know, we all can forget what she did with the porn and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But now you got another question that you want me to, well, I can ask you now. Now you said that WWE owned the rights of China, but how did she use that name when she was doing porn and TNA? Because she was in TNA.
she spent a big chunk of her savings hiring lawyers to get the name back. So she spent so much of her own money just to get the name back, and it took her years to get the name back. So finally she fought them, and it cost her a lot of money, but she wound up getting her name back.
Okay.
Yeah. But at the beginning, she couldn't use it. She had to go through the whole legal system.
Oh, okay.
Isn't the whole thing with China the same thing with Sunny, right? Because Sunny's now, I mean, you Google her name, and she's got some new pictures coming up.
Yeah.
So I think you're in the same
Well, Mike Tyson.
hypocritical. Yeah.
Mike Tyson was convicted, and they put him in after the fact that he was convicted of something much worse. You know, to me.
I agree. I think Hunter should have just said. Never
Yeah,
say
that's
never.
all he had to say. That was the whole thing. If he listen, this girl's life became so tough that she literally packed up and moved to Japan. You know, not knowing anybody. You know, not knowing the language. Doesn't know anybody, right? She goes to Japan. She's teaching English as a second language for like $30 an hour. She's broke. She's not making any money. She's been there for 3 years, like minding her own business. And then, you know, he's got to make a statement like that on television. She's living in Japan. She's not bothering anybody. Why do you gotta? I don't believe in kicking somebody when they're down. All he had to say was never say never, and there would have never been an issue. Yeah, that's it. You know, I mean.
Willie?
After like the incident with Owen Hart, what was the atmosphere and like vibe after that at the show?
Yeah, bro, it was just. I mean, it was just surreal. You know, I mean, like nobody could even contemplate like what was going on. That's why, like, I've read so much. After the fact about Vince not stopping the show and this and that. Bro, if anybody thinks, like, at a moment like that, you know, that anybody is going to be in their right mind, you know, and anybody is going to be able to make rational decisions, you're nuts. Because you'll never be prepared for a moment like that. You're in shock. You're trying to understand, you know, what just happened. You know, I mean, just, you know, like everything just stands still. And, that's why I say, you know, Vince has been criticized over the years for the show continuing, but you can't be expected to make a right decision in a situation like that. So it was, yeah, I mean, bro, it was really tough. The next day was incredibly tough. It was a bad situation.
When will Vince give you the credit you deserve?
Never, ever, and he won't. I mean, and that's fine. And I mean, and I know that, and I accept that because I know how Vince is. Vince wants, he just wants this aura, and he wants this world around him, like, it's Walt Disney and he's Walt Disney. So it's very hard for him to give anybody else credit that was very, very instrumental in the success. So he never will, and I mean, and like it sometimes it bothers me, but it doesn't bother me as much as it used to because he just never will, and that's how he is, and that's who he is, and I've accepted it, and that's it.
Vince, there's two questions. One, I think he should be in the Hall of Fame. And two, what do you think with the heat between Flair and Bischoff back in WCW?
Well, a lot of that went on before, like, I was there. A lot of that heat was going on between them before I was there. So, like, I wasn't really a first-hand witness to it. By the time I got there and Bischoff and Flair was still there, like, there wasn't any heat at that point. I mean, like 2000, I think all that stuff was water under the bridge. So I was never really there when those guys were kind of having an issue.
What did you think of the new blood that you guys came up with?
I thought it was great. I mean, I thought the idea was great. I thought it could have worked. But the reason it didn't was, when you're writing something and you have a vision and you know how it's supposed to lay out, and then, like, your actors don't like the script and don't want to put other people over and don't want to get the young guys over, all of a sudden, now as you're writing, you got to make adjustments as you go along, and as you're making those adjustments, the entire story changes. So, if it would have laid out the way it was supposed to, it would have been great. But, when you were dealing with a lot of veterans that were going to find every way possible to not put the younger talent over, eventually it was going to run into a problem.
Was Shane Douglas, did he go with the group too? Or?
Oh, yeah, no, I never had a problem with Shane Douglas not wanting to put a younger guy over. I mean, ever. I mean, Shane was great. Yeah, Shane was always all business with me anyway.
Candido, he was part of the group too, I think. Him and Douglas, Chris Candido.
Well, not while I was there. He wasn't. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep.
I just want to ask you. I was watching the Monday Night Wars, and Kevin Nash mentioned you that you were trying to.
Speaking of Kevin Nash, perfect timing.
Yeah. Kevin Nash said that as soon as you got into WCW, you wanted Hogan gone. I never heard that from you, but if that was true, did you feel like you have the young talent on that roster to build up what you wanted?
Well, first of all, that's an untrue statement. I could tell you right now, and if Kevin was sitting here, I would tell him that's Kevin's opinion. That's absolutely untrue. The week before I came into WCW, I'll never forget this as long as I live. The main event on Nitro was Hogan and Flair in a match, and they looked horrible. And I remember sitting at home watching that match, and the guys were being exposed. They weren't being protected. They looked horrible. And I remembered the first thing I had to do when I came into WCW was kind of get Hogan and Flair off of TV. Okay, because at that point they were just wrestlers on the roster. They were still wrestling. I realized I had to get them both off of TV and then bring them back in a position that they needed to be in at that point in their careers. That was the plan. And that's exactly what I did. I mean, when we came in, Hogan was off TV, Flair was off TV. We were putting a plan in place to bring them back positioned where they should be. That's what Ed and myself were doing. But of course, the second, I went home, the next week they brought Hogan and Flair back, and they were doing exactly what they were doing, when I left. So, I mean, that me wanting Hogan gone is definitely not true.
Real quick. 1 second, Vince. Does anybody here have a Toyota RAV4 outside parking?
Oh. RAV4?
No one?
No? Okay.
Okay.
As far as all the people that worked in the Attitude Era, and after the comments that Triple H made, it surprises me that you're the only one that actually came for the defense of China. And my question to you is why is that? Is it because old wrestlers are afraid to rock the boat?
Bro, it's real simple. Bro, wrestlers, whether they're 40 or 50 or 60, they're still waiting for that phone to ring. You know what I'm saying? I mean, and it's really not funny. I mean, it's kind of sad in a way because it's like it's all they know. All they know is wrestling. And when they're not wrestling anymore, there's that hope. Like I was just reading online today, some of you guys, might have read it that, Jake Roberts wants to have one more match at WrestleMania. But the thing is, they all want to have one more match at WrestleMania. So you have like literally 95% of these guys that are waiting for the phone to ring. And they're not going to say anything that's going to rock the boat or piss anybody off or jeopardize that. Nothing. To me, it is more important for me to stand up for another individual, especially when that individual lives across the country and can't defend herself. That is much more important for me to do, as a man, because it is the right thing, as opposed to, not defending my friend because if I disagree with the WWE, they may never call me back. I could give a crap if my phone rings. I'm so past that, it's not even funny. So I'll call them out on something. If I think something stinks, I'll call them out on it and I'll say it stinks. But like I said, 95% of the guys that are no longer in the business, they're not going to do anything, to piss off the WWE, because in their mind, they're going to get called for that one more WrestleMania, when the fact of the matter is they never are. I mean, it's never going to happen, but that's why nobody speaks up.
Do you, the current roster, do you think it's time for Vince to retire?
Oh, yeah, yes.
You think he's
yeah.
lost it with this roster? I mean, I see so much talent on the roster.
Yeah.
I see like Bray Wyatt. I know you're a big supporter of Bray Wyatt.
Mm-hmm.
You think he dropped the ball on him a lot already?
Bro, he's dropped the ball on so many people. And listen, it's not, I don't say that to take a jab at Vince or to take a shot at, the guy's gonna be 70 years old. When I'm 70 years old, I just wanna be home, sitting in my lazy boy, watching TV with my dog. That's where I wanna be at 70. I say this all the time, like, I don't know if a lot of you guys follow the website. It's pyroandballyhoo.com. That's my website, right? And I just turned 54 years old, right? I know what hard work it is for me to stay on top of pop culture. Like I got to go on TMZ every day. I got to listen to music that I hate because I try to stay on top of what's going on, and it's a full-time job. I can't imagine being 70 years old and trying to have to keep up with you can't do it. And Vince not being able to keep up with the times, it affects what he's doing on a creative level. But nobody's going to get him out of there. I mean, it's his company. He's going to continue to do it, and it is what it is,
What do you think about NXT?
I'm not a big fan of the product.
You watched it?
Yeah, I mean, I've watched several shows. If you know me and you know my style, I love characters, I love story, I love good dialogue, I love the entertainment aspect of wrestling, because quite frankly, when you have a wrestling match, and I mean all of us have combined have seen millions of wrestling matches. Wrestling matches, at the end of the day, they don't look too differently. There's only so much you could do in a wrestling match. But what makes it different are the characters and the stories and the situations and the dialogue and all that stuff. When I look at NXT, like, I see a lot of good wrestling matches and I see a lot of good wrestlers, but I don't see a lot of entertainment. And I mean, that's what I look for. That's why I love a guy like Bray. Yeah. I mean, the guy's phenomenal. But that's why, I watch it, but I'm not a big fan of it.
When the NXT guys go to WWE, should they keep their characters or they should change their characters?
Well, if the characters are strong in NXT, I think it's silly for them to change their characters when they leave.
They're planning on changing, what's the...
Adrian Neville
to the Mighty Mouse character.
I hope that's just a rumor. Yeah, that's crazy.
So if you were in charge, if you were writing the show, we know Cena's the big money maker, but what would be your main event at WrestleMania this year? What would you push for from the current roster they have right now?
First of all, again, a lot of what I say, especially the internet wrestling community, they don't agree with, and I don't really care. First of all, I don't know if there's ever been a guy like more real and more believable in the history of wrestling than Brock Lesnar. I mean, if wrestling were real, nobody on the planet would beat the guy.
Right.
And I got to be honest with you. Step down. Who's better than John Cena? You can say whatever you want about John Cena. You're tired of seeing John Cena. Say whatever you want about John Cena. There's nobody better than him on that roster. I mean, the guy's a pro. He cuts the promo. He gets it done in the ring. I mean, he looks great. He keeps in great shape. Those are the two top guys, in the WWE. And beyond that, there's a huge drop-off. I mean, there's nobody really in their league. So to me, that's the money, and that's unless somebody steps it up and somebody gets in that category. Nobody's better than those two guys in the federation.
Not even Orton?
Huh?
Not even Orton?
Orton would probably be the closest. I mean, and I was thinking that when you said it, but I would not put him in their category. I'd put him he'd be the guy right below that, but I wouldn't put him in that category.
Right there in the back.
You were WCW, Mr. Russo. What was your experience working with two of my favorite wrestlers, just Eddie Guerrero and La Parka?
Oh gosh, La Parka was freaking phenomenal. That guy was so entertaining to me. I mean, he was him and Hoovy, man, were those guys were so entertaining to me. I got to be honest with you. Unfortunately, I never got to work with Eddie that much, but I'll tell you a great story about Eddie that told me so much about his character and the kind of guy that he was, because nobody ever did this, A lot of times, like in wrestling, drugs run rampant. And not street drugs, prescription medication. The guys get hooked on prescription medication. That's what they get hooked on. It's, they're not going out on the street and scoring heroin and cocaine. It's not that. It's the painkillers, and it's the somas to fall asleep, and it's all that stuff, right? But the thing that makes it so difficult is when guys are under the influence, and you want to help them, and you approach them, they just flat out deny it. I mean, I don't have a problem. I'm tired. I'm hurt. I'm this. I'm that. They'll flat out deny it, and at that point, there's nothing you can do because you're not going to call them a liar. So it's a very tough situation because you want to get them help, but you guys know the story. You can't help somebody. The first thing they got to do is admit they have a problem. If they don't admit they have a problem, you're never going to be able to help them. And I'll never forget, I just started at WCW, and maybe I was in for a month, Eddie Guerrero called me at home, and he said to me, he goes, Vince, I have to tell, and he was like, on the verge of crying. I mean, really broken down. And he said, bro, he goes, I'm addicted to pills. He goes, Vince, I have a problem. I have to go to rehab. I have to take care of this for myself and my family. And I got to tell you, he was like one of the only guys that realized this is getting out of hand. I've got to do something. And I respected him so much for giving me that phone call. It meant so much to me, but it also told me just what kind of a guy Eddie Guerrero was, man. He was a great guy.
Thank you.
All right, go ahead, and then you'll be next.
Since you did win the WCW title accidentally, what was going through your head when you did that?
Who, me?
Yeah.
Nothing was going through my head because Bill Goldberg made my concussion at the time worse than it was. So nothing was really going on through my head. I mean, I just realized, like, when that match was over, like, I had gotten hurt a lot leading up to that match. And, like, when that match was over, like, I knew it was over for me because I had suffered a lot of head trauma up until that point. And like that last time was kind of like the nail in the coffin. And when I got my bell rung that night, like I knew I was done. So that's really it.
What do you think of AJ Styles and Kurt Angle?
As far as what?
Like their wrestling and their characters in the wrestling.
Well, I mean, first of all, Kurt Angle's like, well, both of them, but Kurt Angle's like the nicest guy in the wrestling business. I mean, he's probably a guy I love more than anybody. I mean, just such a pro. The guy's got every right in the world to have an attitude because he's that great, and he's the total opposite. He's the nicest guy in the world. Same for AJ. I thought AJ was starting to peak at TNA when they didn't renew his contract, which I really thought was a mistake. But they're both great guys and obviously great wrestlers.
You guys created a stable, you and AJ, back in the day.
Long time ago, yeah.
It was you, D'Lo Brown.
Yeah.
Can't remember the group name.
That was a long time ago. Yeah.
That was a cool stable.
Yeah, he's great though.
Yeah, you and Road Dogg too.
Yeah.
I got a question. As far as the Attitude Era, who do you think are the 4 top stars that define that era?
The Attitude Era?
The Attitude Era.
Boy, I'd have to say, obviously Rock, Austin, Vince, and I'd say Mick. I'd say those 4 guys, and obviously, I mean, DX was huge, but I'd say those 4 guys.
How much big loss to TNA for losing Samoa Joe?
I don't think it's as big a loss as people think. Listen, I worked with Joe for almost 10 years, and the problem like I always had with Joe was sometimes he was motivated, sometimes he wasn't. Sometimes he'd go out there and he'd put on a match and you'd be like, holy crap, there isn't anybody on the planet better. But then you'd go to the next TV taping and he'd have the worst match of the night. And, Joe had a way of, like always, blaming creative or blaming this one or blaming that one. And, to me, there just comes a point where you kind of got to look yourself in the mirror. And, he was just the guy that, when he was motivated, he was great. And when he wasn't motivated, he was horrible. And, to me, the best, I think because of that, and people like inside the business kind of know he has a reputation like that. I know that might be difficult for him to get in the WWE, but I also think it would be great for him because they wouldn't stand for it. So, like, the Samoa Joe would have to show up every single night or else they'd get rid of him. So, like, I would love to see Joe step up every single night because he's great when he does. So, I don't know. I mean, like I said, if they do wind up using him in the WWE, he's got to show up every single night or he's not going to be there for long.
What are your thoughts on Lucha Underground? Will they make it? And how long before they start charging to see their shows?
Well, I think I don't think they'll start charging to see their shows. I mean, I don't think so at all. They are first and foremost, they're a television show. They're not a wrestling company. So they know as a television show, they need a rabid crowd in there each and every week. I don't think they're going to start charging. But here's Lucha Underground right now is my favorite wrestling show on TV. The others aren't even close. I mean, not even close. But here's my biggest concern with Lucha Underground. You guys watch the show. They shoot everything on film because, as you know, Mark Burnett is the TV guy and Richard Rodriguez is a movie guy. So they're doing everything differently. They're shooting everything on film. That's very, very, very expensive to do. So every episode is costing them a lot of money. My only concern is it's going to take them a while to grow the product, just like any other product. They got to get it out there. They got to let people know it's out there. I think when people watch Lucha Underground for the first time, they'll get hooked. There's no question about it. But my concern is that it costs a lot of money to produce the show, and I just hope they don't run out of that money before they build the audience that they need. That's my only concern.
Out of Ring of Honor and New Japan, I don't know if you're watching, but which one do you think will excel the most in 2018?
I watched New Japan like last week. I've never seen a Ring of Honor show in my life. I would probably say New Japan just because they obviously have a lot more money, you know, and with more money you can do a lot more things. So I mean, I would definitely say New Japan.
I'd also like to add on, since you know Undertaker, he's been working for a while. I mean, his knees have been bad since like the 90s. What do you think he's going to be able to do at this WrestleMania if he actually wrestles?
I don't know, man. I mean, man, when I worked with Taker, like, it wasn't even just his knees. I mean, it was his back. You know, I mean, he had a lot of back issues when I worked with him. I don't know, man. I think Taker is, I know he's a smart enough guy to know that if he physically can't do it, he's not going to do it. But I personally don't want to see him out there again, because at this age in his life, for him to re-aggravate something or get injured again, or God forbid something like that happens at his age now, man, it takes a lot more time to heal the older you get. So, for his own well-being, I hope I don't see him at WrestleMania, but he's a smart enough guy to know that if I can do it, I'm going to do it. If I can't, I won't. I mean, he doesn't need the money. It's not a money issue. He never had an ego. I mean, when I worked with him, it's not an ego thing. But, if he's healthy enough, he'll do it, but I'd be worried about him.
Since you do like Bray Wyatt, do you think Bray Wyatt will go over if he does have the match, or will Taker just win?
Well, I think if they wanted to do it the right way, what I would do is I would get Taker over, and then I would just have Bray snap and destroy Taker and literally end his career. So what that accomplishes is two things. Number one, it gives Taker a last big victory at WrestleMania, okay, and that's his last big win. But on the other hand of the coin, now Bray Wyatt ending his career will be more important than Bray Wyatt beating him in a wrestling match. So I think if they did something like that, they'd accomplish both things.
I got a question. Do you know what it takes to become like a Spanish commentator in WWE?
God, I have no idea. I mean, I know those guys have been there like forever. I mean, I have no idea.
Because I listened to the Spanish product and the commentating is terrible.
Like they're trying to follow, better in English.
They're trying to follow their script how when they're talking and they're not doing it right.
Yeah, I have no idea, man.
What do you think of Raven, like from back in the day when?
Raven, he had the mind of a genius. I mean, he really, really did. Raven is a very, very smart, intelligent guy. But a lot of times, he rubbed people the wrong way because he kind of didn't think before he spoke. So he was very smart, very intelligent, had a lot to say, but never processed his words before they came out of his mouth. And, that kind of turned a lot of people off to him. He kind of buried himself a lot of times. But, I mean, that's who he was. That's just the kind of guy he was. But, I mean, one of the brightest guys in the business I've ever worked with.
Would you ever, like if Jared were to ask, would you ever join his Global Force Wrestling?
Me?
Yeah.
No.
No?
If there was one thing you would change in today's product, what would it be? Like with WWE?
Well, I mean, the obvious answer first, and I'll try to give you more than this, is, the show being 3 hours is just a killer. I mean, it just kills the show. So, I mean, that's first and foremost. I guess I would move the show at a quicker pace, I mean, because again, as time goes on, and it was an issue with the Attitude Era. It's 10 times more now. People have such short attention spans, and especially there's so much on television at any given time. It's hard to sit through a product. but that was the idea of Crash TV. We kept moving it, so there was always something new on. The viewer was always seeing something new. You know, now WWE has gone back to a formula where you have, 6 minutes of a wrestling match, then a 4-minute commercial in between, then another 4 minutes of the match on the other end of it. Nobody's going to sit through that. That's almost like they're just sleepwalking through the writing of the show. Nobody's going to sit through that. So I would just go back to moving the show at a much quicker pace to keep people's attention.
How were you able to get? We were talking about this with somebody. Everybody cared about on TV because in this day and age, I look at like an Al Snow. I know he wouldn't get over right now. They would just bury him, or Crash Holly would just get buried. How were you able to convince, I guess, Vince, like, let's make every character important to the show?
Well, I don't think it was so much convincing Vince. I think that there was just me and Ed Ferrara writing.
Oh, okay.
So there were two guys that were able to zero in on every single thing and every single talent. So we'd sit there and have a conversation like you and I. There's no BS. When that turns into 30 writers, I don't know how you could get anybody over with that many people involved in the process. I don't know. To me, it's impossible.
Right.
So that's what I really think it was. It was two guys, and we concentrated and talked about everybody. But when you have 30 people involved, I don't.
Do you think that's missing now, or it's like the same 6 guys it's all anybody? Personally myself, I'll fast forward Raw until I get to somebody important.
Yeah.
And during the Attitude Era, you wouldn't, because every storyline was important, whether it was for the Hardcore, the Intercontinental Tag Team, or the WWE title.
Yep.
Do you think that's still? Is that lacking? You think a lot, like not making more characters important?
Well, here's the perfect example. Somehow the WWE has turned into the psychology of. And they don't. They're just lazy. That's really what it is. They could tell you whatever they want, but they think we're going to put guys out to wrestle every week, and that's going to get them over. Just if they're in the ring wrestling, that's what's going to get them over. That's not what's going to get. You saw take New Day for instance. Right. They did like 3 weeks of these ridiculous promos, and then they put them out there to just wrestle how are those guys ever going to get over?
Right.
It takes more than just wrestling,
So, it seems like nowadays all the heels are just like cowering away, and all the baby faces always are triumphant. And it seems like all the heels are the same, and like Big Show and Kane and Rollins, they always run away instead of being. And the only guy I can think of right now is Brock Lesnar, who's actually being a dominant heel that people are afraid of. What do you think? Do you think they need to change that and just like make the heels?
Oh God, yeah. So many times the perfect example of what you're saying, and like I see it every single week. Okay, if anybody in this room was freaking Rusev, how many people are you really going to run away from? You know what I'm saying? If you're freaking Rusev, who are you? Rusev isn't going to run away from Brock Lesnar. Let alone anybody else. And they build up Bray Wyatt as this monster, and the next week he's running away. It's but again, so much of it goes back to 30 writers involved in the process. You're gonna get something that's very generic, and each character isn't going to be specific with specific characteristics and specific traits. They're all going to look the same, and it's like you said, every heel runs, and it's just that's why nothing means anything. That's really why nothing means anything.
I agree with. I think it was a tag match. I don't know if it was last year, but I remember there was a 6-man tag, and you brought up a good point, which was, when would you see Undertaker in a 6-man tag? And because they had thrown Bray Wyatt out there, do you think that kind of hurt his character a lot, or a little, or just?
Listen, they have a tendency to hurt characters a little until it means a lot. You know what I'm saying? Like here's a perfect example. You guys know on the internet how over Dolph Ziggler is. That's a perfect example that I'm talking about. About they think because they put the guy out there in wrestling matches every week, he's going to get over. No, he's not going to get over. But here's what happens. Because he's so over with the internet wrestling crowd, right? They keep putting Dolph Ziggler out there, and they keep beating him, thinking, well, they're still going to love Dolph Ziggler. No, it doesn't work that way. The more and more and more you beat Dolph Ziggler, the more credibility he loses, the more of his fans start giving up on him. All of a sudden, Dolph Ziggler doesn't mean anything. So it's a combination of, when you keep doing it over and over and over again, all of a sudden now the guy means nothing. Yeah. And that happens with a lot of guys,
You think that's just Vince hating the internet wrestling community? Because he did it to Bryan, Ziggler, Cesaro, who are 3 internet wrestling community favorites. I mean, do you think now the fans are booing, like the Royal Rumble, them booing, is that bother him, you think? Or he could care less?
Vince is so egotistical. In his mind, his way is the right way, and he's gonna shove it down your throat, and you're gonna buy into it no matter what you say. I mean, that's just how Vince is,
Well, you just said right now that what made you think change his mind from last year when they made Batista won the Rumble, but all of a sudden Daniel Bryan got in the main event WrestleMania, he won the title. So what made you think that might have changed his mind?
It's tough for me to say because honestly, I didn't have my website last year, so I wasn't following the product at all. So I really, really don't know. I mean, it could have had something to do with, maybe at that time Batista had movie offers on the table. And Vince maybe knew Batista wasn't going to be there for the long run. I don't know. But I mean, Vince is, 90% of the time, Vince is going to go with what Vince thinks and not what the audience thinks.
Here's what I see. It's like the same thing last year. Batista won the Rumble. The crowd booed the shit out of him. And then now you see the same thing. Roman Reigns won the Rumble. They booed him like they did Batista. Now we can see another. It looks like we're going to another triple threat match at WrestleMania again. Yeah. So it's basically a repeat.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you think Vince gets it or it just somehow is he listening to the fans like we're booing?
He just said he needs to retire. Yeah. I think.
I honestly, bro, I can't make logic out of his decisions. I mean, I really I worked with the guy for 5 years. So I'll sit back and I'll look at the show and I'll really try to think about why he's doing what he's doing. I can't make any logic out of his sense anymore. I mean, again, it goes back to Ziggler. They had the guy on top of the world following the Survivor Series. You were never going to get that guy any hotter. The next week he comes out and everything you built, you just totally destroy. And I sit there and I just say, Vince, how did that happen? How did you not see? You had the guy so over, and then all of a sudden we forget about him and he's back down in the pile. I can't figure it out.
It's like Cesaro after Mania, he was hot. The hottest he probably ever will be in WWE history. And next week, let's take him with Paul Heyman. And let's get him lost. 3 more questions, and then we'll do the other signing. So you haven't asked one, so go ahead.
What company did you like working for the best, and which one you didn't really like working for that much?
Well, I definitely the WWE at that time. You know what I'm saying? Like I said, when it was just Ed Ferrara and myself, and it was 2 writers. I mean, at that time, that was great. I mean, today, it's a totally different animal. I couldn't imagine ever working there again in that type of environment. The worst was WCW because it was just so political that the wrestling didn't even matter. Like trying to keep your head above water, dealing with the politics, that alone was a full-time job. You know what I'm saying? I mean, forget about the wrestling and having to write a show and get talent over. You had to constantly just, be on the lookout for the sharks every 2 seconds that it took away from the wrestling. And it's almost like the wrestling didn't even matter. That was a bad situation.
Okay, thank you.
since they took away the World Heavyweight Championship and now they only have one big major title, and they're pretty much diminishing the other minor titles, what do you think they're going to do if Brock Lesnar comes like once a month at most, or like to hype a pay-per-view, and that major title is only one person can go after it, while the mid-carders have nothing to like go for, like World Heavyweight, and then the two other titles aren't meaning much in.
Well, see, that's the thing. It's like I was talking about this. This was a while back. If Lesnar can't come to every TV and he can't be there representing the belt at every TV, how the belt has to be represented is that has to be the most important thing on the show, whether Lesnar's there or not. So if Brock Lesnar and your champion isn't there, everything has to revolve around everybody else wanting that belt. That belt has to be the showcase. They didn't do that. I mean, man, there were weeks on when I was watching that show where they didn't mention Lesnar, they didn't mention the belt or the title. So I have no problem with them making that one belt everything. But I mean, it's got to be the showcase each and every week, and I mean, they don't do that.
Now that both like SmackDown wrestlers and Raw wrestlers are on Raw, do you think SmackDown is like pointless now?
I mean, every show that I've seen it is. You know what I mean? I just stopped watching it because there was no point to watch it. But I mean, again, on the other side of the coin, from the wrestler's point of view, it's good that they have two shows because more guys can work and get paid. So like I'm happy about that. But it's a throwaway show, and I mean, I don't know why they handle it that way. SmackDown used to mean something. I don't know now why it doesn't mean anything, but it doesn't.
Butcher, last question. Go ahead.
All right. I want to pretend something here. It's 2018, the year 2018. You're home, you're relaxing, having your cup of joe, and you get a call from WWE, and they want to induct you to the Hall of Fame. How would you accept that?
There's no way like I could accept that if I know other people have been stepped over and abused. I mean, I couldn't. I mean, I'm just telling you. You know what? It would probably, first of all, it'll never happen. Number one. Number two, it would be very difficult to say no. But there's no way I would be a hypocrite and look at some people in the business and even some friends of mine who I feel have been totally mistreated and dishonored and never been allowed in their fictitious Hall of Fame, and then for me to go and accept this, I just don't have that in me. I just won't be able to do it.
Well then, in that respect of decision, well, we thank you for everything you've done. You're at the wrestling guy and everybody here. So we just want to applaud you and say thank you.
Thank you guys. Thanks.
Thank you.